Mom, you don't exist. When a welder discovered she was erased, her CO past exploded back. What would you do if you woke up one morning and discovered you don't exist? Your birth certificate deleted, your social security number erased, your entire life wiped from every government database as if you were never born. This is exactly what happened to Katherine Brennan, a skilled welder and single mother who thought she'd left her dangerous past behind forever. But when a corrupt FBI agent discovers her true identity as Lieutenant Rebecca Hartley, a legendary Navy SEAL Team 6 sniper with 44 confirmed kills, he decides her clean American identity is worth millions on the black market. What follows is an explosive story of a mother's determination to reclaim not just her name, but her daughter's future. A story where a woman who once took impossible shots from nearly 2 kilometers away must now fight an enemy she can't see: the system itself. A story where the greatest warrior isn't the one who kills, but the one who chooses mercy when vengeance would be easier. If you're ready for a heart-pounding military thriller about courage, sacrifice, identity, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and child, hit that like button and subscribe. Because this story will leave you questioning everything you know about who you are, what you're capable of, and how far you'd go to protect the ones you love. This is the story of Katherine Brennan, the woman who didn't exist, the warrior who wouldn't die, the mother who refused to disappear. Let's begin. The welding torch sparked to life in Katherine Brennan's steady hands, its blue flame cutting through quarter-inch steel plate with the precision of a surgical scalpel. The Baltimore shipyard hummed with the industrial symphony she'd grown to love over the past decade. The rhythmic percussion of pneumatic hammers against hull sections, the bass rumble of massive overhead cranes hoisting 1,000-pound components, the metallic whisper of a dozen torches shaping the bones of America's naval future. At 32 years old, Katherine had found something resembling peace in this world of honest sweat and calloused hands. Something far removed from the life she'd buried a decade ago in the mountains of Afghanistan. The morning sun cut through the open bay doors at a low angle, painting everything in shades of copper and shadow. Katherine worked Section 14 of the destroyer hull, her movements fluid and economical, in a way that spoke of muscle memory drilled so deep it had become instinct. Her honey blonde hair, pulled back in a practical ponytail, streaked with premature silver, caught the welding sparks that danced around her like fireflies. Each silver strand was a memory she'd rather forget, a mission that went sideways, a choice that meant the difference between breath and silence. A night when the only sound was her own heartbeat, counting down to the moment when her finger would tighten on a trigger. "Brennan, you're making the rest of us look like amateurs again," Carlos Martinez called out from his station 20 feet away, his voice carrying that particular mix of respect and teasing reserved for those who'd earned their place through skill rather than words. The morning shift crew had long stopped questioning how a woman half their size could outlast and outwork most of them. They'd learned what Katherine had always known: true strength doesn't come from muscle mass. It comes from something deeper, something forged in fires most people couldn't imagine. She lifted her welding mask with a practiced flick, revealing sharp green eyes that held depths most people missed. Eyes that had tracked targets across distances measured in kilometers. Eyes that had seen things that turned men's hair white and made them wake up screaming in the night. Eyes that now watched a 10-year-old girl named Sophie giggle at cartoons and believe that maybe, just maybe, the past could stay buried. "Maybe you should spend less time talking and more time practicing, Carlos," Katherine replied, her voice carrying easy humor. "That bead looks like you welded it during an earthquake." The crew erupted in the kind of laughter that builds camaraderie in tough jobs. Men and women who worked with their hands, who took pride in craft, who understood that every weld they made would carry sailors into harm's way. Their work wasn't just metal, it was responsibility. It was the difference between a ship that came home and one that didn't. Frank Donovan, their sheriff, supervisor, and unofficial patriarch at 68 years old, studied Katherine with the careful attention of someone who recognized kindred spirits. 20 years in Delta Force had taught him to read people the way others read books, and Katherine Brennan was a story with chapters deliberately torn out. The way she moved through the shipyard, always aware of exits, always positioning herself with clear sightlines, always ready. The way she handled tools with the same care most people reserve for loaded weapons. The way her eyes tracked movement before her head turned, processing threats that weren't there. Frank had ever asked, "Some stories you don't pry into. You just recognize the shadows and respect them." Catherine's phone vibrated against her hip with a specific pattern. She'd programmed 3 short pulses, pause, 2 long pulses. Sophie's school. Her maternal instincts, honed through 10 years of single motherhood and sharpened by dangers her daughter would never know about, immediately shifted from yellow alert to orange. She checked the time on her watch, a simple Timex. Nothing that would draw attention or questions. 9:47 in the morning. Too early for lunch problems. Too late for morning attendance issues. The wrong time for routine calls. "Frank, I need 5, she called, already stripping off her heavy welding gloves with practiced efficiency. "Take whatever you need," Frank replied without hesitation, his tone carrying the understanding of a man who'd raised 3 daughters while serving in the world's most elite counterterrorism unit. He knew that particular edge in a parent's voice, the one that said, "Something's wrong and I need to move now." The phone rang twice before Mrs. Patterson answered, and Catherine immediately caught the tremor of nervousness underlying the school secretary's normally cheerful voice. Mrs. Patterson had worked at Ridgewood Elementary for 23 years. She dealt with sick kids, angry parents, broken bones, and every variety of childhood drama. This nervousness was different. This was fear. "Ms. Brennan, this is Mrs. Patterson from Ridgewood Elementary. There's been an incident." The word hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Catherine's blood turned arctic, but her voice remained steady, a skill learned in kill houses and combat zones, where panic meant mission failure, where the calm voice in your radio headset might be the only thing keeping your squad alive. "Is Sophie hurt?" "No, she's not hurt, but there are some people here. Government people. They're asking about you, about your documentation. They say there's a serious problem with your records." Every alarm in Catherine's nervous system started screaming. Government people. Documentation problems. These weren't words that appeared randomly in a Tuesday morning. These were the words that preceded the kind of trouble that ended with flag-draped coffins or disappearances that made the evening news for a day before everyone forgot. "Don't let anyone take her anywhere. Do you understand me, Mrs. Patterson? No one. Not for any reason. I'll be there in 15 minutes. "Ms. Brennan, they have federal badges. They're saying it's urgent and 15 minutes. Catherine ended the call and turned to Frank, who was already watching her with the focused attention of an operator reading a developing situation. He'd seen that look on her face before the moment when civilian Katherine Brennan disappeared and something else surfaced. Something dangerous. "Family emergency. I need to go." His weathered eyes narrowed, decades of combat experience reading signals in her body language that triggered old instincts. The way she'd shifted her weight to the balls of her feet. The way her hands had automatically checked her pockets, verifying keys, phone, wallet, the basic loadout for movement. The way her breathing had slowed and deepened, oxygenating her blood for action. "You need backup." "Just paperwork confusion." Catherine lied smoothly, though her mind was already running through threat assessments at combat speed. Federal agents at Sophie's school. Documentation problems. Someone had reached into the system. Someone was pulling threads. Probably a Social Security mix-up. But even as the words left her mouth, Catherine's trained mind was cycling through possibilities and contingencies. The identity of Katherine Brennan had been crafted by experts, people who owed her their lives, people who understood how to build legends that would withstand scrutiny. CIA case officers who'd promised her a clean slate after Afghanistan, after the shot that had saved 32 Marines but cost her everything she'd been. The kind of people who could make a decorated Navy SEAL lieutenant named Rebecca Hartley die in a drone strike and a Baltimore welder named Katherine Brennan spring to life in the same breath. If that identity was compromised, now it meant someone with serious access and authority was digging. And that meant Sophie was in danger. The drive to Ridgewood Elementary typically took 20 minutes through Baltimore's mid-morning traffic. Catherine made it in 12, taking corners with the precision of someone who'd learned to drive in Fallujah's kill zones, where the wrong turn meant IEDs and the right one meant living another day. Her hands remained steady on the wheel of her 10-year-old Ford pickup, practical, forgettable, the kind of vehicle that blended into working-class America. But her mind was compartmentalizing threats, analyzing patterns, preparing for contact. Red light at Patterson Avenue. She ran it after confirming cross-traffic was clear. School zone on Elmwood. She kept it to exactly 25 miles per hour, not drawing attention. Left turn into the parking lot, scanning for anomalies before she committed to the entrance. The school parking lot appeared normal at first glance. Minivans with stick-figure families decorating rear windows, sensible sedans with teacher parking permits hanging from rear-view mirrors. The crossing guard chatting with the mailman about yesterday's Ravens game. Ordinary America. Soccer practice and PTA meetings and homework battles. But Catherine's trained eye immediately identified the discrepancies. Two black Chevrolet Suburbans parked near the main entrance, government fleet plates barely visible under a coating of road dust. Antennas that suggested encrypted communications capability. Windows tinted beyond what Maryland law allowed for civilian vehicles, the kind of glass that reflected everything and revealed nothing. The kind of vehicles that appeared in places where constitutional rights became negotiable. She parked strategically, truck backed into the space front, facing out for rapid departure if needed. Keys transferred to her left hand, keeping her right hand free for action. Truck positioned so she could use the engine block as cover if shooting started. These were automatic responses, muscle memory, that a decade of welding and PTA meetings couldn't overwrite. The hindbrain never forgot. The warrior never really slept. The school's front office felt smaller with the wrong people in it. Mrs. Patterson sat rigid behind her desk, her face pale with the kind of fear that came from ordinary people suddenly confronted with federal authority. The realization that the rules they had always trusted might not apply, that the system designed to protect them might have turned predator. Sophie sat in one of those uncomfortable plastic chairs that elementary schools seemed to buy in bulk, her Little Mermaid backpack clutched against her chest like a shield. Her blue eyes, the same shade as the father she'd never know about, the Marine who died in Helmand before he knew she existed, were wide with confusion and growing fear. Three people in dark suits stood around them in positions that were tactical rather than casual. Not the relaxed stance of people waiting. The alert positioning of people covering exits, maintaining sight lines ready for rapid response. Federal agents, but something was off about their energy, their body language. They weren't here to investigate. They were here to hunt. "Mommy," Sophie started to rise from her chair, but the female agent, cold brown eyes in a forgettable face, the kind of person who could disappear into any crowd, placed a restraining hand on her small shoulder. The world went red at the edges of Catherine's vision. Every instinct screamed to close the distance, to remove the threat to her child with the kind of violence that had made her a legend in special operations. She could map it in her mind: 3 steps to close the gap, strike to the woman's radial nerve, to dead-arm the limb. Sophie pulled behind her, positioning her body between the agents and her daughter. 5 seconds from threat to resolution. But that would confirm everything they suspected, would turn this from whatever it was into a tactical situation with her daughter in the middle. Instead, Catherine's voice came out with the kind of command authority that made seasoned operators step back. Not loud, not aggressive, but carrying a promise of consequences that reasonable people wanted to avoid. "Take your hand off my daughter." The female agent complied, but slowly, deliberately maintaining eye contact like a predator testing boundaries. The social dynamics of violence establishing dominance through microaggressions. Catherine had seen it in interrogation rooms from Kabul to Kandahar, had used it herself when squeezing sources for intelligence that would save lives. Ms. Brennan, the lead agent, stepped forward, tall African-American man, maybe 45, with kind eyes that didn't match his rigid military posture. His ID badge identified him as Agent Harris, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. "I'm with ICE. We need to discuss some serious irregularities with your documentation." "My documentation is in perfect order." Catherine moved with casual precision, positioning herself between the agents and Sophie, creating a protective barrier that looked natural to civilians, but screamed tactical advantage to anyone with training. Agent Harris noticed his hand drifted incrementally toward his hip, where his service weapon created a subtle bulge under his suit jacket. "That's the problem, ma'am. According to our records, all federal records, actually, you don't exist. There's no Katherine Brennan matching your description in any government database. No birth certificate on file. No social security number in the system. No record of you ever being born on American soil." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Catherine felt Sophie's small hand grip the back of her work shirt, anchoring herself to the only parent she'd ever known. The only solid thing in a world that had suddenly gone liquid and unstable. In the corner of her vision, she saw Mrs. Patterson's shocked expression, the look of someone watching their understanding of reality develop cracks. But Catherine's face remained calm, even as her mind raced through implications and contingencies at the speed that had kept her alive through 100 operations. Someone had burned her legend. Someone with access and authority had reached into federal databases and deleted Katherine Brennan from existence like erasing a line of code. The question was who, and more importantly, why now? After 10 years of quiet life, 10 years of being invisible, what had triggered this? That's impossible, Katherine said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline beginning to flood her system. I have a driver's license, work permits, 10 years of tax returns, filed and paid. I vote in every election. I have a mortgage, for God's sake. All fraudulent, and according to our systems, the female agent interrupted, producing a tablet and turning it to display Katherine's documents with large red invalid stamps across them. As of 8 o'clock this morning, every trace of your existence has been flagged as fabricated, which makes you an illegal alien using false documents to claim American citizenship. This is insane. Katherine pulled out her wallet, spreading her identification on Mrs. Patterson's desk with deliberate calm. Driver's license showing her address in the Hampton neighborhood. Health insurance card, library card, credit cards with her name embossed in raised letters. The accumulated proof of a life lived. Call my employer, Hawkins Shipbuilding. They've been paying me for 10 years. Call the IRS. I've paid more in taxes than most people make. Ma'am? Agent Harris's voice carried what seemed like genuine regret, and Katherine caught something in his eyes, discomfort, maybe even doubt. I need you to come with us to sort this out at the federal building. Your daughter will need to come too until we can verify custody and... No. The word came out with enough force to make everyone in the room tense. Katherine felt the energy shift like air pressure changing before a storm. The agent's hands drifted toward weapons. Their stances widened for stability. The moment balanced on a knife edge between de-escalation and violence. She forced herself to soften, to pull back from that edge. Sophie was here. Civilians were here. This wasn't a battlefield. I mean, let me call someone first. My boyfriend David Quinn, he can pick up Sophie while we sort this out. Harris hesitated, clearly running calculations of his own, then nodded. 5 minutes. Katherine dialed David's number, willing her voice to stay steady as it rang. David Quinn answered on the second ring, his voice warm with the casual affection of 2 years together, 2 years of building something that felt like it might actually last. Hey, beautiful, aren't you supposed to be melting metal right now? David, I need you to come to Sophie's school right now. Bring your press credentials. She kept her tone light but emphasized the last words in the pattern they'd established for emergencies, the code that meant drop everything. This is serious. I need you now. There was a pause. When David spoke again, the warmth was gone, replaced by the sharp focus of a Marine who'd survived Fallujah and Helmand Province, who'd seen the elephant and lived to write about it. How bad? Code Gray. Their private shorthand for government problem immediate response required possible hostile action. Sophie needs you. 7 minutes. The line went dead. David Torres, no David Quinn. She had to remember the name changes, former Force Recon Marine combat journalist who documented America's longest wars with a camera in one hand and a rifle in the other, didn't waste words when action was required. He would come. He would help. He always did. Agent Harris was watching her carefully, and Katherine saw him mentally filing away details. Boyfriend's a reporter. Freelance journalist, Katherine confirmed, noting how the agents exchanged glances. Media attention was kryptonite to federal operations, especially ones that might not stand up to scrutiny. The power of the press, the Fourth Estate, the watchdogs who asked inconvenient questions and made uncomfortable facts public. He's covered Homeland Security issues extensively. Written profiles on ICE operations, immigration policy, constitutional rights. He'll have questions, lots of questions. The 5 minutes stretched like hours. Sophie pressed against Katherine's side, smart enough at 10 to know something was very wrong, but trusting enough to stay quiet. Katherine stroked her daughter's hair, the same honey blonde as her own, but without the silver streaks that marked prices paid in places children should never know about. Each stroke was a promise. Each touch was a vow. Whatever happened next, Sophie would be protected, whatever it cost. David burst through the door at 6 minutes and 40 seconds, his press badge prominent on a lanyard around his neck, a phone already out and recording. At 38, he still moved with a warrior's economy of motion, all efficiency and controlled power. His body language shifted the room's dynamic immediately. The agents recognized him as a fellow predator, even if they didn't know his full history. The way he scanned the room, cataloging positions and threats. The way he angled his body to put Katherine and Sophie behind him without being obvious about it. The way his free hand stayed low and ready. What's going on here? David's journalist voice was different from his regular one, louder, more demanding, designed to unbalance authority figures and create space for truth. I'm David Quinn, Washington Post freelancer, who wants to explain why federal agents are questioning an American citizen without representation. Sir, this is a federal immigration matter, Harris started. Immigration. David's eyebrows shot up in well-practiced incredulity as he moved to Katherine's side, his phone capturing everything with steady precision. This is Katherine Brennan, born in Colorado Springs, 1992. I've seen her birth certificate. Hell, I've met her mother. Katherine's heart clenched. He hadn't, of course. The woman he'd met at Thanksgiving 2 years ago had been an agency asset playing a role part of maintaining the legend. But the confidence in his voice, the specific details, the challenge in his eyes, these were the tools of a man who'd spent years getting difficult people to answer difficult questions. According to our records, that birth certificate is fraudulent, the female agent said, her voice flat and unimpressed. David pulled out his own phone, fingers flying across the screen with practiced speed. I'm calling the Denver Post. They'll want to know why OSS is harassing American citizens in elementary schools. Make a good front-page story. Federal overreach, constitutional violations, scared 10-year-old girl. My editor loves this kind of thing. Mr. Quinn. Harris raised a hand and Katherine caught genuine concern in the gesture. We're just trying to determine the facts here. Ms. Brennan needs to come with us for questioning. It's routine processing. Routine. David's voice carried the kind of incredulity that made good sound bites, the quotable outrage that turned local stories into national news. You're telling an American citizen she doesn't exist and calling it routine. You realize I have 16,000 Twitter followers who care deeply about government overreach, right? Want to be the face of another viral ICE scandal. Katherine touched David's arm, their signal to dial it back to de-escalate before momentum carried things past the point of return. He caught it immediately, moderating his tone slightly, but keeping his phone visible and recording. Where exactly are you taking her? The federal building downtown, standard processing and verification. But Katherine heard what Harris didn't say. She recognized the careful phrasing, the bureaucratic dance around the truth. Her instincts honed in places where the wrong red meant a flag-draped coffin and a widow's tears screamed warnings. They weren't taking her to regular ICE facilities. This was something else, something darker, the kind of disappearance that happened to people nobody missed. I'll come voluntarily, Katherine said, squeezing Sophie's hand in the pattern they'd practiced for emergencies. 3 short squeezes, pause, 2 long ones. Our special code. Remember it. But my daughter goes with David. Not into any system, not anywhere without me knowing exactly where. David. Already texting my editor, David confirmed, which was code for I'm documenting everything and have backup plans activated. Sophie, you're coming with me, sweetheart. We'll get ice cream and figure this out. Your mom will be home before you know it. Mommy. Sophie's voice was small, scared in the way that broke Katherine's heart into sharp pieces. The fear in those blue eyes, the confusion of a child's world suddenly tilting sideways. This was why she'd left. Why Rebecca Hartley had died in Afghanistan. So Sophie would never have to be afraid like this. Katherine knelt to her daughter's level, taking her face in gentle hands. Memorizing every freckle, every eyelash, every feature of the person she loved more than breath itself. Remember what we talked about. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes with paperwork, big mistakes with computer and files. This is just one of those mistakes, a really stupid one that needs fixing. David will take care of you and I'll be home for dinner, I promise. Okay. Sophie nodded, though tears threatened at the corners of her eyes. Katherine pulled her into a fierce hug, breathing in the scent of her daughter's strawberry, shampoo, and crayons, and innocence. She whispered directly into Sophie's ear, words meant only for her. If I'm not back by bedtime, tell David to check the lockbox, the one I showed you. He knows which one. Can you remember that? The one in your closet. That's my girl. Now go with David. Be good. I love you more than all the stars. Love you more than all the ocean, Mommy. It was their ritual, their call and response, the words they'd shared since Sophie was old enough to understand that love was something you measured and declared and built your life around. Katherine stood, releasing her daughter into David's protective care, watching them walk toward the door. Sophie looked back once her backpack bouncing against her small shoulders, her eyes full of trust that her mother would make this right. Katherine had made a career out of never making promises she couldn't keep. She intended to keep this one or die trying. "Let's go," she said to the agents, her voice steady despite the storm building inside her. The ride in the black Suburban was silent except for the encrypted chatter on their radio's codes and designations that meant nothing to civilians but told Katherine these were federal agents working an active operation. She sat in the back seat, hands uncuffed, because they were maintaining the pretense this was voluntary. But she was already memorizing the route, noting the agents' communication patterns, cataloging potential weapons and exit points. Skills she'd thought buried with Rebecca Hartley, rising to the surface like muscle memory. The warrior responding to threat the way lungs responded to oxygen. They drove south through Baltimore past the inner harbor, where tourists ate crab cakes and watched street performers, past the stadiums where fans screamed for football and baseball, into the industrial district, where nobody noticed black SUVs and nobody asked questions. And then they didn't go to the federal building. Instead, the Suburban pulled into an underground parking garage beneath a nondescript office building that could have housed anything from accounting firms to import-export companies. No signs, no markings, just gray concrete and fluorescent lights that hummed at a frequency designed to induce anxiety, to make people uncomfortable without them understanding why. Katherine's internal alarms moved from yellow to orange to red, but she kept her expression neutral, her breathing steady, her body language relaxed. The moment they knew she was afraid was the moment they had power. "This isn't the federal building," she observed, mildly testing their response. "Temporary processing facility," Harris replied, but she caught the discomfort in his voice, the way he didn't quite meet her eyes. He didn't like this either. Good men sometimes found themselves in bad situations, following orders that didn't sit right, compromising principles one small step at a time, until they looked back and didn't recognize the path they'd taken. More private for sensitive cases. They led her through steel doors that locked electronically behind them, with the solid thunk of magnetic seals, the kind that would resist breaching charges. The corridors smelled of industrial disinfectant and something else: fear, sweat, desperation, the scent of people who'd been erased from existence and learned that constitutional rights only applied to people who officially existed. Other victims sat in holding cells visible through reinforced glass windows. Men and women with the hollow eyes of those who'd been disappeared, who'd learned that the system designed to protect them could become their cage. A young woman in hospital scrubs. An older man in construction clothes. A teenager with gang tattoos and terrified eyes. All of them ghosts, all of them nobody. The processing room was sterile white with cameras in every corner, their red lights blinking in sequence like mechanical eyes. A different man waited there, white mid-40s, with the kind of forgettable face that suggested intelligence work. His suit was federal budget gray, unremarkable and invisible, but his watch was a Rolex Submariner, gleaming gold and steel on his wrist. $40,000 of timepiece on a government salary that topped out around 80 grand. Private sector money mixing with government authority. The worst kind of operator. "Ms. Brennan," he said, his voice carrying the flat affect of someone who'd compartmentalized empathy away. Or should I say Chief Petty Officer Sarah Mitchell. The name hit Katherine like a sledgehammer to the solar plexus, driving the air from her lungs. But she didn't let it show. Didn't flinch. Didn't give him the satisfaction of a reaction. Sarah Mitchell, a name she hadn't heard spoken aloud in 10 years. A name that belonged to a ghost, to a woman who died in a drone strike she'd called on her own position to eliminate a high-value target when there was no other way. "I don't know what you're talking about," Katherine said, her voice flat and empty. "My name is Katherine Brennan." The man smiled without warmth, the expression of someone who enjoyed having power over others, who got off on the control and the fear. "My name is Special Agent Marcus Vance, and we both know that's not true. You were reported KIA in Operation Copper Mountain. Afghanistan, 2014, except you survived, didn't you? Crawled out of that hellhole with third-degree burns and enough shrapnel in you to set off metal detectors. And somehow you convinced someone to give you a new identity, new name, new life. Who was it? CIA witness protection? Some bleeding heart in JSOC who thought you deserved a second chance after what you'd done?" Katherine remained silent, her training taking over. When captured, give nothing. Make them work for every piece of intelligence. Create confusion, buy time, wait for opportunity. Name, rank, serial number if they know it. Nothing else. The old rules, the ones drilled into her at survival school, at Sari training, where they'd broken her down and taught her to resist. But her mind was racing through implications at combat speed. Someone had burned her identity. But who? The people who'd created Katherine Brennan were professionals, career intelligence officers, who knew how to build legends that would withstand hostile scrutiny. For this to happen, someone had deliberately reached into classified systems and pulled her file. Someone with access, someone with motive. And why now? After 10 years of quiet life, what had triggered this? The answer came with Vance's next words, and Katherine felt ice crystallize in her veins. "You killed Mahmoud al-Rashidi," Vance said, pulling up a tablet and swiping through what looked like classified operational reports. Documents that should have been buried in black sites and eyes-only archives. The Scorpion, one shot, one kill from 1,847 meters in winds gusting to 40 knots. Legendary shot, the kind they teach at Scout Sniper Basic Course, as theoretically possible but practically impossible. You made it look easy. He pulled up a satellite image on his tablet, a mountainside in Afghanistan, coordinates blurred but recognizable to Katherine. A red X marked where the Scorpion had died, his skull exploding in pink mist, visible even at that distance through her scope. That shot saved 32 Marines who were pinned down in a kill zone. Made you a legend in the teams. Also made you a target, because the Scorpion had a brother, younger, smarter, with better connections and a lot more money, Hassan al-Masri, and he's been looking for his brother's killer for 10 years. Katherine kept her expression blank, but inside memories flooded back like water through a broken dam. The weight of the Macmillan TAC-50 rifle against her shoulder. The way the stock fit perfectly into the pocket formed by her collarbone. The sound of her spotters breathing as they calculated wind drift, Coriolis effect, elevation changes. The moment of perfect stillness between heartbeats, when the world narrowed to nothing but crosshairs and target, when all the noise fell away and there was only the mission. The gentle squeeze of the trigger, the recoil against her shoulder, the eternal second of bullet flight before impact. The confirmation through her scope, target down, Marines moving, getting out of the kill zone, mission success. She'd thought it was worth it then, worth the cost, worth what it had taken from her. The thing is, Vance continued, clearly enjoying his moment of power, savoring it like fine wine. Hassan just learned something interesting. His brother's killer didn't die in Afghanistan. She's alive, living in Baltimore, welding ships for the same Navy she used to serve, raising a daughter, playing suburban soccer, mom, and imagine his surprise. Imagine his rage. "You're selling me," Katherine said flatly. Not a question, a statement of fact. She'd seen enough of the world's darkness to recognize it immediately. This wasn't about immigration or documentation. This was human trafficking, dressed up in federal authority. "Selling is such an ugly word," Vance replied, leaning back in his chair with the confidence of someone who believed they held all the cards. "I prefer facilitating justice. Hassan wants closure for his brother's death. You want to exist. Your daughter wants a mother. We can make all of that happen. Or none of it. It's really up to you. You're FBI, not ICE. I'm a patriot who understands that sometimes the system needs funding outside official channels. Black operations don't fund themselves, Miss Brennan, or Mitchell, or whatever you want to call yourself today." Vance's smile was sharp as broken glass. $2 million, cash, untraceable. Hassan gets you and the peace of mind that comes with revenge. Your daughter gets placed in foster care with a good family college fund, the works. Better than growing up visiting federal prison, which is your other option if you don't cooperate. Katherine felt the walls closing in, but her expression never changed. In her mind, she was already wargaming scenarios, calculating odds, measuring distances to doors and potential weapons. Vance was confident, which meant he'd done this before. This wasn't his first sale. This was a system, a machine well-oiled and practiced. "How many others?" she asked quietly. "Excuse me, how many other people have you erased and sold? How many American citizens have you trafficked?" Vance's smile widened, and Katherine saw genuine pride in his eyes. The satisfaction of someone who thought they were clever, who believed they'd found the perfect crime. Enough to fund several very important operations that keep America safe. You should be proud, really. Your sale will help prevent the next 9/11, help keep terrorists off American streets, help fund operations that Congress is too squeamish to support through official channels. Your sale will line in your pockets. That too. Patriotism and profit aren't mutually exclusive, Ms. Brennan. Welcome to the real world. He stood straightening his tie with practiced precision. You have 24 hours to think about it. Tomorrow night, Hassan al-Masri arrives for the transaction. Private jet into BWI diplomatic papers from Saudi Arabia. Consider your daughter. Consider what her life looks like without you. Consider that you can't fight the system from inside a cell. Because one way or another, you're disappearing. The only question is whether Sophie remembers you as a mother who abandoned her or as one who died protecting her. They put Katherine in a cell clean but Spartan, with a narrow cot bolted to the wall and a steel toilet that offered no privacy. No windows. Just fluorescent lights that hummed at that same anxiety-inducing frequency. The walls were reinforced concrete, probably thick enough to muffle screams. 3 other women shared the cell block, all with the same haunted look of people who'd been erased from existence. First-timer. The woman in the adjacent cell was perhaps 40 with calloused hands that suggested manual labor and eyes that had seen too much. Her voice carried the resigned tone of someone who'd accepted their fate. You'll get used to it, or you won't. Doesn't really matter. Something like that, Katherine replied, already cataloging potential assets. The cell doors were electronic, but building codes required manual overrides for fire safety. She could see the mechanism if she angled right. The cameras had blind spots where the cells met the walls, maybe a foot-wide gap that someone trained could exploit. The fluorescent lights could be shattered to create weapons, their metal housings sharp enough to cut. Ellen Wagner, the woman offered. Been here 6 days. They say I never existed, but my kids would disagree. 3 of them waiting for Mama to come home from her cleaning job. Kate, how many others? Maybe 20 total. They rotate us out. Some disappear at night loaded into vans. Nobody knows where they go, but we all know it's not somewhere good. New ones arrive to replace them. All of us are nobodies. Foster system kids, grown-up immigrants who got citizenship but have no family to miss them. Veterans who fell through the cracks. People who won't be missed. People whose existence is inconvenient to someone with power. Katherine felt the pattern clicking into place like rounds chambering in a magazine. Vance wasn't just selling her, he was running an entire operation. Selling clean American identities to criminals who needed them, selling the people themselves to whoever paid top dollar. Using people who couldn't fight back because they technically didn't exist. The perfect crime hidden behind federal authority and bureaucratic complexity. She thought of Sophie safe with David for now. But for how long? What would happen when Vance decided the girl was leverage or worse, another asset to sell 10 years old with honey blonde hair and blue eyes? There were monsters in the world who would pay handsomely for that. No, that couldn't happen. Wouldn't happen, whatever it took. Kate, Ellen's voice broke through her thoughts. You got that look, the one people get when they're thinking about doing something stupid. Katherine turned to face her, and something in her expression made Ellen take an involuntary step back. For just a moment, the mask slipped. The suburban welder disappeared. And what showed through was the warrior who'd made impossible shots and survived impossible situations. Not stupid, Katherine said quietly. Necessary. She had 24 hours before Hassan al-Masri arrived. 24 hours to escape to get Sophie somewhere safe to burn down Vance's operation and everyone involved. 24 hours to become Rebecca Hartley one last time. The clock was ticking, and Katherine Brennan, Rebecca Hartley, Sarah Mitchell, whatever name she wore, had never missed a deadline in her life. The fluorescent bulb in Katherine's cell had been loose since the moment she'd arrived. Not broken that would have attracted attention from the guards. Just loose enough that it flickered occasionally, creating the illusion of electrical problems. Loose enough that her fingers working it millimeter by millimeter, whenever she stood on her cot to stretch, could unscrew it completely when the time was right. That time was now, 11:47 p.m. Katherine had spent the past 13 hours observing, cataloging, planning. The guards changed shifts every 6 hours with a 15-minute overlap for briefing and transition. During that overlap, the incoming team was distracted by handoff procedures, while the outgoing team was mentally checking out, thinking about home and sleep, and anything but the nobodies in the cells. Meals came at 7 a.m. noon and 6 p.m. delivered by a trustee who was himself a prisoner, a man named Patterson, who moved with the shuffle of someone broken by the system. The cameras recorded but weren't actively monitored. She'd tested this with small movements, noting the lack of immediate response. The night shift was skeleton crew, 2 guards in the main room, 1 doing rounds every hour, 3 total between her and freedom. Ellen Wagner watched from the adjacent cell as Katherine stood on her cot, her movements deliberate and precise. "What are you doing?" "Getting us out," Katherine replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "All of us." The bulb came free with a gentle twist. Katherine wrapped it in her shirt, muffling the sound as she brought it down hard against the steel toilet. The glass shattered with a muted crunch, leaving her with several shards ranging from 2 to 6 inches long. She selected the longest, roughly the length of a combat knife, though far more fragile. "You're going to get yourself killed," Ellen hissed, but there was hope in her voice underneath the fear. Hope that maybe, just maybe, this crazy woman with the cold eyes might actually pull off the impossible. "Not the first time someone's told me that," Katherine replied, using a strip torn from her shirt to wrap the base of the glass shard, creating a makeshift handle. "Maria, in about 10 minutes, you are going to have a seizure. Can you fake that?" "My cousin has epilepsy. I've watched enough episodes to wait. My name's Ellen." "I know. But when you're convulsing on the floor, the guards won't care what your name is. They'll care about liability and lawsuits and not letting a prisoner die on their watch." Katherine tested the edge of the glass against her thumb, razor sharp. "Crude but effective. When they open your cell for medical, I move." "Understand." Ellen nodded, swallowing hard. "What about the lock on your cell?" Katherine had been working on that problem all afternoon. The electronic locks were sophisticated, but they had a weakness: they required power. And power meant circuits, and circuits could be compromised. She'd already used her own blood, pricking her finger against a rough edge of the cot frame, letting it seep into the lock mechanism. Now she added the final ingredient. She urinated into her hand, crude, disgusting, but effective, and smeared it across the lock's electronic panel. The combination of blood, urine, and time would corrode the connections, create shorts in the delicate circuitry. It wouldn't open the lock, but it might kill it completely. Might make it fail safe open, or at least fail in a way that made it vulnerable. 9 minutes later, Ellen began to seize. It was a masterful performance. Her body went rigid, then began thrashing with violent jerks that slammed her against the cell bars. Her eyes rolled back, showing whites. Foam appeared at the corners of her mouth. She'd bitten into a piece of soap, Katherine realized, creating the effect. The sounds she made were inhuman, guttural, the kind that triggered primal fear responses in anyone who heard them. 2 guards rushed in, and one already radioing for medical, the other fumbling for his override key. The corroded lock on Katherine's cell chose that moment to die completely, not opening, but going dark, its LED indicator flickering between red and green before going black. In the chaos and confusion, neither guard noticed. Katherine positioned herself in the blind spot glass shard concealed against her inner wrist body, pressed flat against the wall beside her cell door. Her breathing slowed, deepened. Her heart rate dropped to 50 beats per minute. The state of controlled calm that preceded violence, the place where operators lived during action. The guard opened Ellen's cell, moving inside to check her vitals, while his partner maintained position outside, hand on his radio. Standard protocol. One checks the prisoner, one maintains security. But they'd made a critical error. They'd turned their backs to the other cells, assuming the electronic locks would hold. Katherine moved like water through a cracked fluid, silent, inevitable. 3 steps brought her behind the first guard. Her left hand snaked around his throat, applying pressure to the carotid arteries in a blood choke that would render him unconscious in 6 seconds. He tried to struggle, but she was already inside his defenses, using his own body weight against him. At 5 seconds, his knees buckled. At 6, he was out. The second guard turned hand, going for his gun, but Katherine was already there. She'd closed the distance before he could draw, before his training could override his shock at seeing a prisoner outside her cell. The glass shard pressed against his carotid artery, sharp enough that he felt the prick, felt the first drop of blood beginning to run down his neck. Keys, radio, weapons, now. Her voice was flat, empty of emotion. The voice of someone who'd done worse things to worse people in worse places. He complied, hands shaking as he unclipped his equipment belt. His eyes were wide with shock, trying to reconcile the suburban welder from the intake photos with the predator holding a glass knife to his throat. "How many prisoners total?" Katherine demanded. 23. "How many guards on night shift?" 6. "Good. You're going to release everyone. Then you're going in and open the exit doors. Then you're going to forget you ever saw any of us. Understand? Lady, you don't understand. Vance is going to have much bigger problems than one guard who cooperated under duress. Katherine zip-tied him to the cell bars with his own restraints, tight enough to hold, but not tight enough to cut off circulation. She wasn't trying to hurt anyone who was just doing their job. Ellen, get everyone ready. We're leaving. The escape was controlled chaos. 23 ghosts moving through the facility like smoke. Katherine leading them with hand signals she hadn't used in a decade. Signals that her body remembered even if her conscious mind had tried to forget. Hold, move, cover, contact front. All silent, all precise. They encountered two more guards, both neutralized with non-lethal force. Katherine's training was designed for killing, but she'd learned to modulate, to control the violence to stop short of permanent damage. These men were just doing their jobs. They didn't deserve to die for Vance's crimes. The exit doors were magnetically sealed, requiring both a key card and a PIN code. Katherine used the equipment she'd taken from the guards, and when that wasn't enough, she used intimidation, the kind that came from being someone who absolutely would resort to violence if necessary. The doors opened, and 23 people burst out into the Baltimore night like prisoners from Alcatraz. Some scattered, immediately disappearing into the industrial district's shadows. But Ellen and 3 others stayed with Katherine, following her lead as she navigated through streets she'd memorized on the drive in. There's a homeless shelter 6 blocks north. Katherine told them, her voice carrying command authority, even dressed in prison clothes with a makeshift glass knife. St. Vincent's. They don't ask questions. Get there, get help, get your lives back. What about you? Ellen asked, her eyes showing gratitude and concern in equal measure. I have unfinished business. Katherine borrowed Ellen's phone, a cheap burner that the guards had missed, and dialed David's number from memory. He answered on the first ring, his voice taut with tension. Katherine, Jesus Christ, where are you? Industrial district near the port. She was already moving putting distance between herself and the facility as sirens began to wail in the distance. Sending GPS location now. Who's with you? Frank from the shipyard. Agent Harris, it's complicated. Harris is there. Katherine's danger sense spiked hard. Agent Harris had been part of the team that grabbed her part of the system. Why would he be with David? He's clean, or clean enough. Katherine Vance is moving you tomorrow night, selling you to Hassan al-Masri for $2 million. But there are others. 23 others, I know. I just freed them. Katherine was running now, feet finding their rhythm in a cadence drilled so deep that a decade couldn't erase it. The runner's high started to kick in, endorphins flooding her system, pushing back the exhaustion. David gets Sophie somewhere safe, out of state if possible. Already done. She's with my sister in Philadelphia, thinks it's a fun sleepover. Katherine, we're coming to get you. No, I'm coming to you. This ends tonight. She hung up and kept running, the Baltimore night air cold in her lungs, the city lights blurring past as she moved through alleys and side streets with the confidence of someone who'd navigated worse terrain under fire. Katherine Brennan had escaped. Rebecca Hartley was awakening. And the people who tried to erase her were about to learn a lesson in consequences. The abandoned cannery at Fells Point squatted against the harbor like a broken tooth, its shattered windows reflecting the distant lights of Baltimore's rebuilt waterfront. In another life, this place had processed tons of seafood daily, feeding the nation. Now it processed nothing but shadows and rust, forgotten by the city's gentrification, useful only to people who needed privacy. David Quinn waited in the shadows with the practiced stillness of a Marine who'd waited in too many dangerous places to be rattled by one more. Beside him, Frank Donovan stood with the steady presence of a man who'd seen the elephant and lived to tell about it, his weathered face calm despite the circumstances. Agent Harris stood apart, nervous energy radiating from his federal-issue windbreaker, checking his phone every 30 seconds. She said she's coming here. Harris kept looking over his shoulder as if expecting either rescue or retribution to appear from the darkness. She'll be here, David confirmed, though his own anxiety was a living thing crawling up his spine. Katherine had sounded different on the phone, not scared, but focused in a way that suggested she'd made a decision about who she needed to be. And David had seen enough combat to know that when warriors made that particular decision, things got messy. Frank hadn't spoken in 10 minutes, his eyes constantly scanning the perimeter with the practiced attention of a lifetime operator. He'd positioned them with clear sight lines to all approaches, 2 separate escape routes mapped in his mind, and enough tactical advantage that they could hold this position against a squad if necessary. His hand rested casually on the Glock tucked into his waistband, hidden beneath a Ravens jacket that had seen better decades. A shadow moved wrong against the loading dock, separating from the darkness with liquid grace. Frank's hand tightened on his weapon, but David recognized the movement pattern. Economical, purposeful, dangerous. It's her, David breathed. Katherine materialized from the night like she'd been born from it, her prison clothes torn and stained with blood that wasn't all hers. Her honey blonde hair had come loose from its ponytail, falling around her face in tangled waves. But it was her eyes that made Harris take an involuntary step backward. They'd changed. The careful suburban mother was gone, replaced by something that made the hair on the back of David's neck stand up. Chief Hartley? Harris breathed the name, coming out like a prayer or a curse. Katherine's head snapped toward him with predator focus, and for a moment David saw the calculation in her eyes. Threat assessment range to target probability of hostile action. Then she relaxed fractionally, recognizing Harris as non-hostile. That name died in Afghanistan. You're the one who contacted David. Ma'am, I recognized you this morning. Your movement patterns the way you positioned yourself between your daughter and potential threats. I served in Iraq military police 3 tours. I knew you were military, but when I ran your prints through the system for the intake processing, Harris swallowed hard, looking like a man unburdening a terrible secret. They came back classified beyond my clearance level. Then 2 hours later, Vance showed up and took over the entire operation. Told us it was routine immigration fraud, but nothing about it felt routine. You knew Vance was a dirty. Frank's voice carried the particular disgust reserved for those who betrayed the uniform, who sold out the people they were supposed to protect. Suspected, he runs a special task force off the books. Started as legitimate witness protection, or so the story goes. But something changed about 2 years ago. People started disappearing. Good people, Americans with nobody to miss them. Harris pulled out a flash drive, holding it like it contained secrets worth killing for, which it probably did. Everything I could copy without triggering security alerts. Financial records, prisoner transfers, shipping manifests. 40 documented sales over 18 months, maybe more. Katherine took the flash drive, pocketing it without looking at it. How many people has he sold? At least 40 that I can confirm with documentation. But I think it's more. Vance targets people with military or specialized backgrounds. Their identities are worth more on the black market. Former operators, intelligence assets, anyone with security clearances that could be reactivated. He's not just selling people. He's selling America's tactical advantages. Jesus? David muttered, his journalist mind, already assembling the story, thinking about sources and corroboration and the headlines that would bring down careers and trigger congressional investigations. Hassan al-Masri, Katherine said, her voice flat. When does he arrive? Tomorrow night, 8 p.m., private jet into BWI, diplomatic papers from Saudi Arabia. He's bringing $10 million in untraceable bearer bonds. Harris hesitated, looking like he wanted to say something but wasn't sure how. Ma'am, he doesn't just want you dead. The intelligence we've intercepted suggests he wants to break you first. Make an example. Make it last. He's been planning this for 10 years. Katherine's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes, not fear, but acknowledgement. She'd known what she was signing up for when she pulled that trigger in Afghanistan. Actions had consequences. Bullets didn't just kill targets, they created ripples that spread across years and oceans and lives. He can want whatever he likes, she said simply. Frank, you still connected with anyone at Bragg? The old soldier's eyes glinted with something that might have been anticipation. Might know a few people who haven't forgotten what honor means. People who remember that operators don't leave operators behind, even retired ones. We need a team, 4 operators minimum. People who can move tonight without orders, without questions, without official sanction. Katherine, David interjected, moving to stand beside her. We should go to the FBI, the real FBI. Give them Harris's evidence, let them handle this through proper channels. With what evidence? Katherine cut him off, her voice harder than he'd ever heard it. A flash drive from an agent who'll be dead or disappeared the moment Vance realizes he's turned. My testimony from a woman who doesn't officially exist. David, this is beyond law enforcement now. Vance has 23 people in holding cells ready to be sold like cattle. We don't have time for bureaucracy. We don't have time for warrants and hearings and the justice system grinding slowly while people disappear. Frank was already on his phone speaking in the clipped shorthand of special operations using codes and call signs from a life most people didn't know existed. Eagle 6, this is Grizzly. I need a favor. The kind you can't take back. 4 operators, Baltimore tonight, full kit. I'm calling in every marker from Fallujah to Helmand. He listened, his weathered face creasing into something that might have been a smile. Roger that. Semper Fi, brother. He ended the call and looked at Katherine with professional respect. 4 hours. They're at Quantico for training rotation. Unofficial leave starts in 30 minutes. They'll be here by 0300 with enough gears to start a small war. How long? Katherine asked. 4 hours. They're at Quantico for joint training exercise. Unofficial leave starts in 30 minutes. Harris looked between them, realization dawning on his face like a sunrise nobody wanted to see. You're planning an assault on a federal facility. That's terrorism. That's on a human trafficking ring that happens to be using federal resources. Katherine corrected her voice, carrying the kind of certainty that brooked no argument. On an operation that has sold at least 40 American citizens to foreign nationals. On a criminal conspiracy that reaches into federal law enforcement at the highest levels. You can leave now if you want, Agent Harris. No one would blame you. This is going to get messy and careers are going to burn. Harris straightened, and David saw something harden in the younger man's expression. The moment when a person decides what kind of person they want to be, what principles they'll actually defend when defending them, costs something. My daughter's 10, same age as yours, Ms. Brennan. If someone erased me, sold me, left her alone in the world. He shook his head. No, I'm in, whatever it takes. David pulled Katherine aside, his hands gentle on her arms, despite the blood staining her clothes. Up close, he could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the weight of decisions made and prices paid. You don't have to do this. We could run. Disappear for real this time. New names, new cities, start over somewhere they'd never find us. And leave those people to be sold. Katherine's voice was quiet but fierce. Leave Vance free to do it again, to someone else's family. Leave Harris twisting in the wind for doing the right thing. She touched his face, a moment of softness in the gathering storm. I ran once, David, after Afghanistan. Changed my name, buried my past, tried to be normal. Tried to pretend I could just put down the gun and pick up a welding torch and everything would be fine. But normal people don't get to save anyone. And those people in that facility, they need someone who isn't normal. Sophie needs her mother. Sophie needs a mother she can be proud of. One who stood up when it mattered. One who did what was right, even when it was hard. Katherine kissed him, fierce and quick, tasting of determination and something like goodbye. Besides, you're going to keep me alive. That's what Force Recon Marines do. Right? Keep Navy assets breathing. Despite everything, David smiled. Inter-service rivalry at a time like this, especially at a time like this, someone has to maintain standards. Frank rejoined them, tucking his phone away. His expression was serious, but there was an energy to him that David recognized from combat zones, the focus that came before action when talking was done and doing began. Teams en route: Bull Johnson, Padre McAllister, Anvil Brooks, and Spark Morrison. All recently separated from JSOC, all looking for purpose after the war's ended. They'll bring enough gear to outfit a platoon. Bull. Katherine's eyebrows rose, and for the first time since she'd appeared from the shadows, David saw something like surprise on her face. Tommy Johnson from Team 3. You know him. We worked together in Helmand. Good operator, better human being. Saved my life twice, which means I owe him beer for eternity, according to SEAL tradition. Some of the tension eased from Katherine's shoulders, replaced by something like hope. What about Vance's schedule? Harris pulled up his phone, displaying a document that looked like it had been photographed quickly, secretly. He'll be at the facility by 0600 to prepare the prisoners for transport. Until then, it's skeleton crew, maybe 8 guards total, all contract security, not federal agents. Most of them probably don't even know what Vance really does. They think they're guarding illegal immigrants awaiting deportation. Transport how? Shipping containers at the port. Same way he's done it before. They've got a legitimate import-export company as a front. Load the prisoners into modified containers, ship them to international waters, then transfer to whoever bought them. 12 hours from loading to transfer point, then they're gone forever. Katherine studied the harbor, her mind already building the operation the way she'd built 100 others in another life. But this one mattered more than all the others combined. This wasn't about geopolitics or oil or terrorism. This was about people who'd been erased, about families torn apart, about a system corrupted from within. We hit at 0500 and, she said, her voice carrying command authority that made even Frank straighten slightly. Dark shift change, confusion, guards tired and thinking about going home. 2 teams Alpha secures the prisoners, gets them mobile and calm. Bravo locates and neutralizes Vance before he can call for backup. Rules of engagement. Frank asked carefully, and David knew what he was really asking. How far are we willing to go? What lines are we willing to cross? Katherine was quiet for a long moment, and David saw her wrestling with something internal. The woman she'd been, the woman she'd tried to become, the woman she needed to be now. Non-lethal if possible, she said finally. These guards might just be doing a job, following orders, not knowing what they're part of. We're not executioners. But Vance himself, her eyes went cold. He's a clear and present danger to American citizens. He's a traitor profiting from human misery. We stop him, permanently if necessary. That's murder, Harris said quietly, not judgmental, just stating fact. That's justice, Frank corrected, his voice carrying the weight of 2 decades in the world's shadows. Sometimes they're the same thing. Sometimes the system fails and people like us have to step into the gap. It's not pretty, it's not legal, but it's necessary. 4 hours later, the team assembled in a warehouse Frank had borrowed from a contact who owed him favors dating back to Desert Storm. The kind of favors that never expired, that transcended law and normal life, that existed in the brotherhood of men who'd bled together in places their families would never know about. Katherine stood before a whiteboard drawing facility layouts from memory, while 5 of America's most dangerous men reviewed their equipment with the casual expertise of people who'd done this too many times to count. Tommy Kodiak Johnson was 6'4" of Louisiana muscle wrapped around tactical brilliance, with hands that could crush skulls or perform field surgery with equal skill. Miguel Padre Santos carried rosary beads and enough C4 to level a city block, a contradiction that somehow made perfect sense when you knew his story. David Anvil Brooks looked like an accountant until you saw him move, until you realized that his mild manner was camouflage for a predator. And Marcus Spark Morrison got his nickname from reflexes that bordered on precognition, from the ability to see threats before they developed and respond before others even processed. "Gentlemen," Frank said formally, his voice carrying the gravity of the moment, "meet Lieutenant Commander Rebecca Hartley." "Katherine Brennan," she corrected immediately, but Kodiak was already grinning, a huge smile that split his face and made him look about 10 years younger. "Holy hell, Hartley. We thought you were dead. That shot in Kandahar, the one that got the Viper. We heard you went down in a drone strike after." "I did, and I'm not her anymore." Katherine's tone brooked no argument, carrying the kind of command authority that made even veteran operators pay attention. "I'm a welder from Baltimore who needs to rescue some people. That's all you need to know. That's all I'm asking you to do." "Yes, ma'am," Kodiak replied, but his grin remained. The respect in his eyes was unmistakable, the recognition of a fellow warrior, someone who'd walked through the same fire. "Good to see you, vertical, whoever you are." Katherine turned to the whiteboard, all business now. 23 prisoners, 8 guards, 1 primary target. Vance will have a close protection detail, probably private contractors with actual combat experience. The facility has electronic locks with manual overrides, cameras on 30-second recording loops, and no external alarms. They don't want local PD stumbling onto their operation and asking questions. Entry point. Padre asked, already calculating explosive requirements, thinking about breaching charges and shape charges, and how to take down doors without killing everyone behind them. Subtle until it can't be. We need the prisoners mobile and calm. Panic kills operations like this faster than bullets. Katherine drew entry points on her makeshift diagram. Alpha team takes the north entrance, secures the guard post, initiates prisoner release. They need to move fast, but controlled, establishing trust, preventing stampede. "I'll take Alpha," Frank volunteered, but Katherine shook her head. "You're Alpha team lead. You've got the experience to keep civilians calm under fire, to project authority without aggression. Kodiak, you're with Frank and Anvil. Padre, you're with me on Bravo. We enter from the loading dock, locate and neutralize Vance before he can trigger any contingencies." "Katherine," David started, but she cut him off with a look. "You're Overwatch. You and Harris coordinate with Baltimore PD once we're clear. We'll need ambulances, trauma counseling, legal representation, and someone to spin the media narrative in a way that doesn't end with all of us in federal prison." The media narrative, Harris asked, looking confused. Rogue FBI agent running human trafficking ring gets taken down by concerned citizens who discovered his operation. Hero cops respond to anonymous tip and secure the scene. Federal task force investigates, finds widespread corruption. Everyone goes home happy except Vance and whoever he was working with. Catherine's smile was sharp as a knife edge. It's not even that far from the truth. Spark raised his hand like a student in class, which looked absurd coming from a man who could field strip a rifle blindfolded. Ma'am, what about Hassan al-Masri? He lands tomorrow at 8 p.m. Even if we take down Vance's operation, the brother still knows who you are, still wants revenge. One problem at a time, Catherine said, but David saw the calculation in her eyes. She was thinking ahead, planning for contingencies, preparing for the moment when this operation was done, and the next threat emerged. He lands tomorrow. By then, Vance's operation will be ashes. He'll have no one to buy from, no infrastructure to rely on. Unless he decides to take his revenge anyway, Kodiak pointed out his tactical mind, already working through scenarios. He's got money, resources, connections. Losing Vance doesn't mean losing motivation. Catherine's smile was winter cold, carrying echoes of a woman who'd once made impossible shots in impossible conditions. Then he'll learn what his brother learned. Some fights you don't walk away from. They moved at 0433, unmarked vehicles converging on the industrial district as Baltimore slept. Catherine rode with Bravo team herself, Kodiak and Padre. The familiar weight of tactical gear felt like coming home after a long exile. The Sig Sauer on her hip, the knife on her chest rig, the controlled breathing that preceded violence. All of it as natural as welding had become, as necessary as protecting Sophie. Hartley, Kodiak said quietly as they approached the target using her old name. Because in this moment, in this space between civilian and combat, he needed to address the operator, not the mother. That shot in Kandahar, 1,847 meters in a sandstorm. That was you, wasn't it? That was someone who doesn't exist anymore. Roger that, but just so you know, that shot saved my squad. We were pinned down, 32 Marines about to get overrun. Then the Viper's head just wasn't there anymore. We lived because someone made an impossible shot. His voice carried something between gratitude and reverence. We lived because of you. Catherine said nothing, but something loosened in her chest. For 10 years, she'd carried that kill like original sin, like a stain that could never wash clean. She'd taken a human life from nearly 2 kilometers away. Ended a father, a brother, a son. The fact that he'd been a terrorist, that he'd killed dozens of innocents, that stopping him saved dozens more. None of that had made it easier to live with. But maybe, just maybe, it had been worth it. Maybe that shot, that moment, that choice had rippled forward through time to create this moment now. Maybe everything was connected in ways she couldn't see. They inserted at 0500 exactly, Frank's voice crackling through their earpieces with professional calm. Alpha in position. Guards are tired, minimal alertness. Visual on 2 tangos at the north entrance, 1 visible on camera patrol. Breaching in 30 seconds. Copy, Katherine replied, leading her team through shadows that seemed to part for them. 3 ghosts in tactical black, moving with the kind of coordination that came from years of training in combat. Bravo moving to secondary entrance. Weapons tight, maintain noise discipline. The loading dock was unguarded. Vance's arrogance, assuming no one would dare attack a federal facility, or maybe just his belief that the people he disappeared didn't matter enough for anyone to come looking. Catherine felt a spike of anger at that casual dismissal of human dignity, but she channeled it into focus. Anger was useful if controlled, deadly if it controlled you. The door's lock yielded to Padre's picks in 12 seconds. He'd been the best entry man in his unit, could open anything from padlocks to safes to hearts if you gave him time. They flowed inside, weapons up, but fingers off triggers until they confirmed hostile intent. The quarter beyond was industrial bland concrete and fluorescent lights and the smell of disinfectant trying to cover something darker. Catherine recognized the rope from her escape earlier. Her body remembered the turns, the distances, even the slight slope in the floor where settling foundation had created an angle. Muscle memory combining with conscious thought, operator and mother working together. Frank's voice, Alpha has the guard post. 2 tangos down, non-lethal. Moving to cell block. Copy, Catherine whispered into her mic. Bravo proceeding to primary target location. They heard the commotion ahead, shouts running, feet, the electronic shriek of alarms as Frank's team began the prisoner release. But also something else cheering. The prisoners realizing they were being freed, not transported. Realizing this was rescue, not just a different kind of cage. "Contact front," Kodiak whispered, and Katherine saw them, two contractors in tactical gear, escorting Vance toward a reinforced door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." Their weapons were up professional grade, and their positioning showed training and experience. Katherine didn't hesitate. The flashbang grenade rolled across the floor like a child's toy, then erupted in divine thunder and holy light. She was moving before the flash died, vision protected by her turned head and closed eyes, training, guiding her through the temporary blindness. The first contractor took a strike to the radial nerve that deadened his gun arm, followed by a leg sweep that put him on the ground. Her knee found his solar plexus, driving the air from his lungs. Conscious, but incapacitated. Kodiak handled the second contractor with similar efficiency. Faster, actually, his massive hands catching the man's weapon and twisting it away before delivering a palm strike to the jaw that turned out the lights but didn't break bones. Vance's ears ringing and eyes streaming from the flashbang still managed to draw his weapon. But Katherine was already there, her hand clamping on his wrist with crushing force, striking the nerve cluster that made his fingers spasm open. The pistol clattered to the concrete floor. She followed with a knee strike to his thigh that dropped him like a puppet with cut strings. "Bravo has the target," she reported into her mic, zip-tying Vance's hands behind his back as he groaned through the pain. "Package secure." "Alpha has all prisoners accounted for," Frank replied, his voice carrying controlled satisfaction. "Moving to extract point." But Vance was laughing through his pain, blood running from his nose where he'd face-planted onto the concrete. "You think this ends with me? You have no idea how deep this goes. How many people want what I'm selling? This is bigger than you can imagine, bigger than some washed-up SEAL and her geriatric friends can stop." Katherine knelt beside him, voice conversational, despite the violence that had just occurred. Maybe you're right, and this is bigger than we can handle. But you're done, Vance. Those people you were going to sell, they're free. Your operation finished. And you're going to prison for a very long time." "Prison?" Vance's laugh turned ugly bitter. "I know too much. CIA, NSA black operations, you can't imagine. They'll never let me testify. I'll be dead within a week, and this will all be blamed on some convenient patsy. You just don't get how the game works." "Probably," Katherine agreed, hauling him to his feet with professional efficiency. "But that's a week more than you gave your victims. A week to think about what you've done. A week to regret." Harris's voice crackled through comms. "Baltimore PD en route, 3 minutes. Federal backup behind them." "Time to go," Kodiak said, but Katherine hesitated, staring down at Vance. This man had erased her, threatened Sophie, sold dozens of innocent people into slavery. The warrior part of her, the part that still wore Rebecca Hartley's face in her nightmares, wanted justice delivered right here, right now, permanently. But that wasn't who she chose to be anymore. That wasn't the example she wanted to set for Sophie. "The brother," she said to Vance, "Hassan al-Masri. Call him, tell him the deal's off. He'll come anyway." Vance's eyes held a vicious satisfaction. "For you, he knows who you are now. He'll never stop." "Good." Katherine's voice was cold as winter midnight. "Let him come. I'm not hard to find anymore." They left him there tied and broken for the legitimate authorities to find. The prisoners were already being loaded into vehicles Frank had arranged, not official transport, but a network of veterans and friends who asked no questions when duty called. People who understood that sometimes the system failed and citizens had to fill the gap. Katherine found Ellen Wagner in the crowd, wrapped in a blanket someone had provided, but standing tall despite the ordeal. "Thank you," Ellen said simply, and in those two words Katherine heard volumes: gratitude, respect, hope for a future that seemed impossible hours ago. "Thank yourself. That seizure performance was Academy Award worthy. My kids. Harris will help. He's one of the good ones. You'll get them back." As sirens filled the air and Baltimore PD swarmed the facility, Katherine stood with David on a rooftop 2 blocks away, watching the aftermath unfold like a stage play. The tactical gear was already packed away, Katherine back in civilian clothes that didn't quite hide the warrior beneath. "It's not over," David said quietly, stating the obvious because sometimes the obvious needed to be said. "The brother, Vance's network, whoever he was selling to." "No, it's not." Katherine leaned into his warmth, allowing herself one moment of peace before the next storm. "But 23 people are going home to their families tonight. Ellen's 3 kids get their mother back. That's worth something." And tomorrow Sophie comes home from Philadelphia. We have dinner like a normal family. Maybe watch a movie, do homework, all the ordinary things. Katherine looked out over Baltimore, the city that had sheltered her for 10 years, that had let her be someone other than a warrior. And if Hassan al-Masri wants to find me, well, Katherine Brennan, Welder, Baltimore Shipyard. I'm in the phone book. Come and get me. Frank joined them, the old soldier moving with a renewed purpose despite the night's exertions in his 68 years. The boys are asking if you need anything else, Kodiak especially. Says he owes you a debt from Kandahar that can't be repaid. Tell them the debt's paid. They came when it mattered. They risked everything for people they didn't know. That's enough. They'll stay in the area for a few days, just in case. Frank studied her carefully with eyes that had seen too much and understood more. You know this isn't over. I know, but I'm done running, done hiding. Katherine looked out over her city where her daughter waited and her life existed, even if the databases had temporarily forgotten. Rebecca Hartley died doing her duty. Katherine Brennan lives protecting her family. If al-Masri can't understand the difference, that's his problem. Harris approached his federal windbreaker replaced with a Baltimore PD jacket cover for his presence deniability if things went sideways. Vance is in custody. He's already trying to make a deal naming names. This is going to be big, Katherine. Bigger than just Baltimore. Senate investigations, DOJ task forces, the whole 9 yards. That's your fight now, Katherine replied. I'm just a welder. Harris smiled sadly. No, you're not. You're a hero, even if no one can ever know it. As dawn broke over Baltimore Harbor, painting the industrial district in shades of gold and shadow, Katherine Brennan stood between her two lives, the operator she'd been and the mother she'd chosen to become. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Hassan al-Masri would come drawn by vengeance and decade-old hate. Vance's network would seek retribution. The government would ask questions about how a federal black site had been raided by ghosts. But today, 23 people were free. A corrupt agent was in custody, and a mother could go home to her daughter. The radio in David's pocket crackled with Sophie's voice small but strong. Uncle David, is Mommy okay? David handed Katherine the radio. She keyed it, her voice steady despite the emotions threatening to overwhelm her. I'm okay, baby. I'm coming home. Mom, they said you didn't exist, but that's the stupidest thing I ever heard. You're the most real person I know. Katherine laughed, surprising herself with the sound, with the release of tension and fear and determination. You're right, sweetheart. I exist. I'm real, and I'll be there soon. Get your homework ready. We're going to tackle that math together. She handed the radio back to David, then looked at the assembled warriors, Frank, the JSOC operators, Harris, and her, David. Her tribe gathered by circumstance, but bonded by purpose, by the willingness to step into the dark places and do what needed doing. Breakfast. Kodiak suggested, his massive frame somehow looking cheerful despite the night of violence. I know a place that doesn't ask questions about blood on your knuckles. Breakfast, Katherine agreed. But first, someone needs to teach me how to exist in government databases again. I have a job to get back to. Already on it, Harris said, pulling out his phone and typing rapidly. Amazing what you can do with Vance's access codes and a little righteous anger. Katherine Brennan, born Colorado Springs, 1992, is being restored in all systems as we speak. Clerical error, very embarrassing for the federal government, full apology forthcoming. That easy. That easy when you have an FBI agent who actually wants to protect and serve instead of profit and betray. Harris met her eyes with something like reverence. Ma'am, what you did tonight. My daughter's safe because people like you exist. All of our families are safer. Thank you. Katherine nodded, uncomfortable with gratitude she felt she didn't deserve. But Frank understood, placing a weathered hand on her shoulder with the weight of shared experience. You saved lives tonight, sailor. Own it. Let it balance the books a little. As they walked toward breakfast, and whatever came next, Katherine felt something she hadn't experienced in 10 years, the possibility of peace. Not the absence of conflict, but the knowledge that she could face whatever came with truth instead of lies, with strength instead of hiding. Tomorrow would bring new battles, but tonight she'd won. The text message arrived at 3 o'clock in the morning, 3 days after the raid that had freed 23 souls and put Marcus Vance in a federal holding cell. Katherine read it in the darkness of her bedroom, David sleeping peacefully beside her, unaware that war had just been declared in digital silence. The Viper had a family. Now you will know what it means to lose yours. H. No signature needed. Hassan al-Masri had arrived. Katherine slipped from bed with practiced, silence muscle memory guiding her to the concealed safe in her closet where she'd stored items a welder shouldn't own. The Sig Sauer felt cold and certain in her hand, familiar weight that brought no comfort. She checked the load with automatic precision, chambered around with a sound that seemed deafening in the quiet house, then sat in the darkness, thinking about cycles of violence and whether they could ever truly be broken. 3 days of manufactured normalcy. Sophie back from Philadelphia chattering endlessly about her cousin's new puppy and asking if they could maybe get a dog too. Please, Mom, I'll walk it every day, I promise. David writing his story about the trafficking ring, carefully omitting details that would compromise anyone involved, threading the needle between truth and operational security. Katherine returning to the shipyard where Frank and the crew welcomed her back with no questions asked, where the rhythm of welding torch and steel became meditation. Even a visit from Harris, now heading a joint task force investigating Vance's network, confirming that Katherine's identity was fully restored in all federal systems, that Katherine Brennan existed again in every database that mattered. She'd almost believed they could return to normal. Almost. Katherine picked up her phone, typing quickly in the emergency code they had established. Within minutes, responses came back like digital cavalry. Frank, on my way, 20 minutes. Kodiak team spinning up. Where and when? Harris FBI resources at your disposal. Say the word. David stirred beside her combat instincts, bringing him from sleep to alert in seconds. Katherine. She showed him the text message. His expression hardened from sleep soft to combat ready. In an instant, the Marine surfacing through the journalist like a submarine breaching. How did he get your number? Vance. Had to have given it to him before we took him down. Hassan's been planning this for 10 years. He's not going to let a little thing like his contact being arrested stop him. Katherine was already moving, pulling on jeans and a black tactical shirt that could pass for civilian wear. David gets Sophie. We're moving to the safe house. She's got school in 4 hours. She's got a target on her back. Move. The command authority in Katherine's voice left no room for argument. 20 minutes later, they were in Frank's truck, a beast of American steel that looked like it had survived wars, which it probably had. Sophie sat between them, confused but trusting, clutching her stuffed rabbit and asking questions in a small voice that broke Katherine's heart. Mom, where are we going? On an adventure, baby. Uncle Frank has a cabin in the mountains. We're going to stay there for a little while. Is this because of the bad men from before? Katherine exchanged a look with David over Sophie's head. Her daughter was too smart for her own good, sometimes too perceptive. It's because Mom needs to make sure everyone stays safe. Can you be brave for me? I'm always brave. You taught me that. Sophie looked up with those blue eyes, her father's eyes, though she'd never know it. Being brave means doing the right thing, even when you're scared. That's my girl. The safe house was a cabin in the Catoctin Mountains that Frank had maintained since his Delta Force days, the kind of place that existed off the grid and in cash transactions, where men who'd done dark things for their country could disappear when the darkness followed them home. Kodiak's team followed in 2 vehicles, a protective convoy that would have made any rational predator reconsider their life choices. Harris met them at the cabin as dawn broke over the mountains, his federal sedan looking absurdly out of place among the tactical vehicles and pine trees. We've got a problem, he said without preamble, not wasting time on pleasantries when action was required. He showed them satellite footage on his tablet, a warehouse near Baltimore's port heat signatures, indicating at least 20 bodies military-grade vehicles, what looked suspiciously like crew-served weapons. Hassan didn't just come for you, he brought an army. Kodiak studied the footage with professional attention, his tactical mind already dissecting the problem. Private military contractors, probably executive outcomes or Wagner Group remnants, mercenaries with no rules except the paycheck. He's not trying to be subtle, Frank observed, his weathered eyes tracking the movement patterns on the screen. He wants you to know he's coming, wants the fear, the anticipation. It's psychological warfare before the shooting starts. It's not about me anymore, Katherine said quietly, watching Sophie through the window as David helped her unpack in the cabin's single bedroom. It's about terror, about making an example. He wants the world to know what happens to people who kill his family. Padre crossed himself, rosary beads clicking softly. So we hit first. Strike the warehouse, eliminate the threat before it can move against your family. 20+ mercenaries in an urban environment. Anvil shook his head. Always the cautious one, always running the math. Civilian casualties would be massive, media nightmare. Every news outlet in the country would be covering it within hours. Plus, it's technically an act of war. Harris added his federal training warring with his desire to help. Foreign nationals on American soil with diplomatic cover. State Department would lose their minds. International incident, congressional hearings, everyone goes to prison. So we wait, Sparks' fingers drummed against his rifle, nervous energy manifesting in movement. Let them come to us. Hope they don't hurt innocents while we're being legally careful. No, Katherine said, and everyone turned to look at her. She stood decision crystallizing with the clarity that came before combat. We give him what he wants. Me. The room erupted in protest, but Katherine raised her hand for silence. When she spoke, her voice carried the command authority of someone who'd led men in combat, who'd made life and death decisions in the heat of battle. Listen, Hassan wants a public execution, a spectacle. Revenge served with an audience? Fine. We give him one, but we control the where and when. We make it a trap instead of an ambush. Frank understood first, his weathered face creasing into something that might have been respect or might have been worry. You want to bait him, use yourself as the lure. The shipyard, Katherine continued, her mind already mapping the operation. Tomorrow night, isolated enough to prevent civilian casualties, industrial enough to provide tactical advantages. And symbolic, it's where Katherine Brennan exists every day, where the woman he's hunting works and lives and belongs. You're putting yourself in the kill zone, David said flatly, his voice carrying all the fear he was trying to suppress. I'm choosing the battlefield, Katherine corrected. There's a difference. Hassan's been planning this for 10 years. He won't be able to resist the chance for poetic justice. The woman who killed his brother standing in the place that represents her new life. He'll come, and when he does, we'll be ready. Harris pulled up blueprints on his tablet, professional instincts overriding his concerns. The shipyard's a tactical nightmare. Cranes, containers, half-built ships, 300 acres of sightlines and cover. A lot of places to hide shooters. Exactly, Kodiak said, understanding dawning. A lot of places for us to hide shooters. He brings 20 mercs. We know the terrain, we have the high ground. We can set up overlapping fields of fire, create kill zones, control the engagement. David, Katherine started, but he cut her off. I'm going with you. David? Non-negotiable. You want to play bait, fine. I've done stupider things in Fallujah, but you don't do it alone. You don't get to be the martyr while Sophie loses both parents. Katherine saw the determination in his eyes, the Marine who'd survived 3 tours in hell and wasn't about to let the woman he loved face danger without him. She nodded. Harris, can you keep local PD clear of the area? I can sell it as a federal anti-terrorism drill. Joint task force exercise, live ammunition, keep civilians away. That'll give you maybe a 2-hour window before someone high enough up realizes what's really happening and starts asking questions that have uncomfortable answers. 2 hours is generous, Katherine said. If this takes more than 20 minutes, we've already lost. They spent the day preparing with the kind of focused intensity that preceded combat. Weapons cleaned and sighted, positions scouted using satellite imagery, and Frank's encyclopedic knowledge of Baltimore's industrial district. Ammunition counted and distributed. Emergency protocols established for every contingency they could imagine, and some they probably couldn't. Katherine spent the afternoon with Sophie, memorizing her daughter's face like she might not see it again, teaching her to play checkers, reading her favorite book aloud even though Sophie could read it herself. Just being present in the moment, storing memories like ammunition for whatever came next. Mom, you're scaring me, Sophie said quietly as the sun began to set, painting the cabin in shades of gold and shadow. Remember what we talked about being brave. That it's not about not being scared, it's about doing what's right despite the fear. That's my girl. Katherine pulled her into a fierce hug, breathing in the scent of strawberry shampoo and childhood innocence. I have to go do something right tonight. Something important. But I'll be back for breakfast. Okay. Promise. Katherine had never lied to her daughter. She wouldn't start now, even when a lie would be easier. I promise to do everything in my power to come back, to fight with everything I have, to be smart and careful and remember that I have the best reason in the world to survive. Sophie pulled back, studying her mother's face with those 2 wise eyes. You're going to fight the bad man who's angry about his brother? Yes. Is Uncle David going with you? Yes. And Uncle Frank and his friends? Yes. Sophie nodded, processing this information with the seriousness of a 10-year-old who understood that adult problems sometimes required adult solutions. Then you'll be okay, Because you're the strongest person I know, and you have help. That's what you always tell me. It's okay to ask for help. When did you get so smart? I have a good teacher. Sophie hugged her mother again, fierce and tight. Kick their butts, Mom. Language, young lady. You say worse when you're working on the truck. Fair point. As night fell over the Catoctin Mountains, Katherine stood with David on the cabin's porch, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. This far from city lights, the Milky Way was visible, a river of light flowing across the darkness. I need to tell you something, David said quietly, in case things go wrong tonight. David, don't. Let me say this. Please. He turned to face her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. I've loved you from the moment I met you at that veterans support group. When you were just Katherine the welder, before I knew about Rebecca or Afghanistan or any of it. I love the way you listened to other people's stories. The way you helped that homeless vet find housing. The way you showed up every week and never made it about yourself. David, I love that you're a warrior and a mother, that you can weld steel and make impossible shots. That you chose mercy when vengeance would have been easier. That you're brave enough to be vulnerable, strong enough to ask for help. He pulled out a small velvet box, opening it to reveal a simple silver ring with a tiny sapphire, Sophie's birthstone. Katherine Brennan, will you continue existing with me? Will you marry me so we can grow old together and drive Sophie crazy with embarrassing parent stuff? Katherine looked at the ring at this man who'd seen her at her most dangerous and never flinched, who'd stood between her and darkness more times than she could count. That's the worst proposal I've ever heard. It's the only one you've ever heard. Still terrible. You're supposed to say something romantic about love and forever. I love you more than good whiskey and accurate journalism. Forever seems too short for what I'm feeling. Is that better? Getting there. Katherine Brennan, who makes my heart stop every time she smiles, who terrifies me and awes me in equal measure, who is the strongest and bravest person I know, will you marry me? Yes. Katherine took the ring, slid it onto her finger. It fit perfectly, of course. David had probably consulted Frank, who noticed everything. But I'm keeping my name professionally. Katherine Brennan has a good ring to it for a welder. Deal. Now let's go make sure you live long enough to make me the happiest man alive. The shipyard at night was a forest of steel and shadows, transformed from workplace into battlefield by intention and necessity. Katherine walked through the main gate at exactly midnight. No attempt at concealment or stealth. She wore her welding jacket over tactical gear, a deliberate contradiction. A statement. The blue-collar American worker over the warrior, ordinary life over extraordinary violence. David flanked her at 20 meters visible, but not obviously protective. His press badge caught the security lights, another calculated statement, the free press bearing witness, documentation that would make this harder to cover up or deny. Katherine's phone buzzed. Unknown number, but she knew who it would be. You came. Hassan's voice was cultured, British-educated, boarding school, smoothing away any rough edges. Nothing like his brother's harsh desert tones, the accent of a man who'd grown up in refugee camps before finding his calling in terror. You threatened my daughter. Where else would I be? Your daughter, yes. Did you think about my brother's children when you killed him? 3 sons who grew up without a father. 3 boys who asked every day when daddy was coming home. 3 young men who now dedicate their lives to avenging him. Your brother was a terrorist who killed innocent people. He made his choice. And you made yours. Now we both live with the consequences. Or in your case, die with them. Movement in the shadows. Katherine counted infrared laser designators painting the darkness. 12, maybe 15 shooters taking positions in the steel forest, but also subtle counter-movement that civilians wouldn't notice. Kodiak's team ghosts in the industrial maze, taking their own positions. I know who you are now, Hassan continued, and Katherine could hear the satisfaction in his voice. Rebecca Hartley, the ghost sniper, the woman who doesn't miss, the legend who died but didn't die. How does it feel knowing your secret is out, knowing you can never hide again? That woman died in Afghanistan. No, she just changed her name. But a wolf in sheep's clothing is still a wolf. You can pretend to be a welder, pretend to be normal, but I see you for what you really are. A killer, a murderer who took my brother from his family. He stepped into view 50 meters away, surrounded by contractors in full tactical gear, bristling with weapons. Hassan himself wore an expensive suit, as if attending a board meeting rather than an execution. The softness of wealth versus the hardness of warfare. A man who'd never pulled a trigger hiring men who lived by them. "I'm going to kill you," he said conversationally, like discussing the weather or stock prices. "Then your boyfriend. Then everyone who helped you. And then when you're all dead and gone, I'm going to raise your daughter as my own. Teach her about her mother, the murderer. Make her understand what you really were. Make her hate your memory the way my nephews hate your name." The shot came from nowhere and everywhere at once. Hassan's left shoulder exploded in red mist, in bone fragments, spinning him to the ground like a puppet with cut strings. His contractors reacted instantly, weapons up, searching for threats in every direction. But the shot hadn't come from any position they expected, from any vector that made tactical sense. "Contact unknown bearing 270. Kodiak's voice crackled through Catherine's earpiece. "I don't have a visual on the shooter." Another shot. One of Hassan's contractors dropped his knee, shattered by a bullet that came from nowhere. Then another shoulder wound. Then a fourth, also a shoulder. Precise, disabling, professional. Not killing shots, wounding shots designed to neutralize without executing. "Someone's hunting them," Frank reported from his position. "Pattern suggests..." "Catherine, that's your shooting pattern. Target selection, shot placement, everything. But you're 20 meters from the nearest weapon." Catherine felt ice crystallize in her veins. Her shooting pattern, her target selection, her preferred shots, shoulders, and knees disabling without killing unless absolutely necessary. "There," Padre called out. "Crane 4 halfway up. I've got movement." Catherine looked and felt her world tilt on its axis. The shooter was a woman moving through the crane's structure with familiar efficiency, with movements Catherine recognized because they were her movements. Blonde hair caught the moonlight. The rifle was a Macmillan TAC-50, the same model Catherine had used in Afghanistan, the same weapon that had made the impossible shot. The woman fired again. Another contractor down, another precise wounding shot. Hassan's mercenaries were panicking now, firing wildly at the crane while trying to drag their wounded and their employer to safety. But they were in a kill zone, and the shooter was systematically destroying their capability to fight. "All teams do not engage the unknown shooter," Catherine commanded, already starting to run toward the crane. "I say again, do not engage." She climbed the crane's ladder with desperate efficiency, David following, despite her shouted warnings to stay back. 60 feet up, she found the shooter's position. The rifle was there, still warm from firing recently used. Brass casings scattered on the platform, but no shooter. "What the hell?" David gasped, catching up. Movement below. Catherine looked down to see someone in welding gear walking calmly through the chaos, heading straight for where Hassan's remaining men had taken cover. The figure moved exactly like Catherine moved, same gait, same posture, same economical use of motion. "No," Catherine whispered, understanding hitting like a physical blow. She half climbed, half fell down the crane, hitting the ground running. But she was too far away, too many obstacles between her and the figure in welding gear. She watched as the figure reached Hassan's position, moving with confidence that suggested they belonged there. The contractors, confused and demoralized by the sniper attack, hesitated just long enough. The welder drew a pistol. Catherine's pistol, the Sig Sauer she thought was still in her safe at home, and shot two contractors center mass. Non-lethal shots, but delivered with enough force to drop them hard. The others fled their employer, abandoned their payday not worth dying for. Hassan, shoulder bleeding, looked up at his executor with hate and fear mixing in his eyes. You're supposed to be her." The welder knelt beside him, and Catherine heard her own voice speaking words she'd never said. "I am her, the real her, the one who doesn't forgive, the one who finishes what she starts." "Stop!" Catherine shouted, sprinting the final distance. The welder turned, and Catherine found herself looking at her own face. Not exact, the scars were wrong, positioned differently. The eyes were a slightly different shade of green. The silver streaks in the blonde hair were on the wrong side, but close enough to be a sister, or a doppelganger, or something impossible. "Hello, Catherine," the double said calmly, using Catherine's voice, Catherine's inflection, Catherine's way of speaking, or should I say hello myself? "Who are you?" "I'm what you could have been. Would have been if you hadn't gotten soft, if you hadn't chosen a welding torch over a rifle." The double turned back to Hassan, who was trying to crawl away, leaving a blood trail on the concrete. "This one threatened Emma, our daughter. What's the appropriate response to that?" "Her name is Sophie, and the appropriate response is justice, not murder." "Same thing, different words." The double raised the pistol to Hassan's head, finger tightening on the trigger. Catherine moved. Not toward the double, that's what she expected, but toward Hassan, throwing her own body between the gun and the target, shielding him with herself. You want to kill him, you kill me first. The double laughed, a sound Katherine recognized from her darkest moments, from nights when the nightmares were so bad that she couldn't remember who she was anymore. You would die for the man who came to murder your family, the man who wanted to take your daughter and twist her mind against you. I would die to keep my daughter from having a killer for a mother. She already does. How many confirmed kills, Rebecca? 44. We both know the number. 44 human beings who stopped existing because you pulled a trigger. Rebecca Hartley is dead. Rebecca Hartley is standing right in front of you holding a gun ready to finish what you started in Afghanistan. The double's voice hardened. Katherine's own voice turned cold and certain. You called in that drone strike on yourself. You wanted to end the killing. But they pulled you out, gave you a new name, a new life. And you actually thought you could play house B normal, raise a child without that blood on your hands. You're not me, Katherine said with sudden certainty, pieces clicking into place. You're what someone thinks I am. What Vance created when he realized his primary plan might fail. The double tilted her head, a gesture Katherine recognized because she did it herself when processing new information. Smart, always were too smart. Yes, Vance found someone who looked close enough, trained her, studied you, prepared her to become you if the sale fell through. If his primary operation failed, I become Katherine Brennan. Take your life, your daughter, your boyfriend. Everything. Perfect backup plan. But here's the thing, the double continued circling slowly, maintaining distance. I studied you so long, I know you better than you know yourself. I know every operation, every kill, every nightmare, and I know you want this. She gestured at Hassan with the gun. You want him dead for threatening Sophie. Admit it. Part of me does, Katherine admitted, because lying would be pointless. The part that put 44 people in the ground for God and country. The part that learned violence as a language and spoke it fluently. The part that still wakes up at 3 a.m. checking the windows. So let me do it. Let me be the monster so you can stay the saint. Let me pull the trigger so Sophie never knows her mother is a killer. Sophie already knows, Katherine said quietly. She knows I've done hard things, made hard choices. She knows I'm not perfect, but she also knows I choose every day to be better than my worst moments, to be more than the sum of my sins. Choice. The double spat the word like a curse. You think you get to choose. You think those 44 deaths just disappear because you picked up a welding torch and played suburban mom. No, I live with them every day, but I don't add to them. That's the choice. That's the difference between who I was and who I'm becoming. David's voice came from behind the double, and Katherine saw him positioned with clear-shot weapon drawn. Drop the pistol. The double didn't turn, didn't flinch. Mr. Quinn, Marine Force Recon, 8 years of service, 17 confirmed kills. You understand necessity. You know sometimes the trigger needs to be pulled. I understand you're not Katherine. Katherine would never monologue. She'd have already acted. The double smiled. Katherine's smile turned predatory. True, but I needed her close enough. She moved impossibly fast, the gun swinging not toward Hassan or Katherine, but toward the cabin where Sophie would be if she were here. A psychological shot meant to trigger Katherine's protective instincts to make her react without thinking. And Katherine did react, lunging forward, just as the double had calculated. The gun reversed in a fluid motion, aimed now at Katherine's chest at point-blank range. Predictable to the shot came from above, from Kodiak's position on Crane 7. The double's gun hand exploded in red weapon, spinning away into the darkness. She screamed, clutching the destroyed hand to her chest, blood pumping between her fingers. Kodiak's voice crackled through comms, professional and calm. Clear shot, clean shot. Tango neutralized. Katherine kicked the gun away, then looked at her double, this twisted mirror of what she could have become, what Marcus Vance had tried to create. You studied me, but you missed the most important part. I'm never alone anymore. I have people who watch my back. People who care. That's what you'll never understand. Frank and the team materialized from the shadows, weapons trained on the wounded double. Harris arrived with FBI backup and ambulances, medics rushing to treat Hassan and the wounded contractors and the double. The double laughed through her pain, a sound that carried madness and defiance. This isn't over. Vance had contingencies, other doubles, other lives he prepared to steal. You'll never be safe. They'll keep coming. Maybe not, Katherine agreed, watching as Harris cuffed the double, reading rights she probably didn't care about. But I'll be real. I'll be present. I'll be the mother Sophie deserves, not the ghost you are. Hassan being loaded onto a stretcher by paramedics caught Catherine's eyes. His face was pale from blood loss, tight with pain, but his expression held something like confusion. You saved me. After I came to kill you, to take your daughter, you used your body to shield mine. Why? Catherine looked at him, this man who'd come to destroy everything she loved, who'd brought an army to Baltimore seeking vengeance. She saw not a monster, but a brother consumed by grief, trapped in a cycle of violence that stretched back decades. Because someone has to break the cycle. Your brother killed innocents. I killed your brother to save Marines. You came to kill me to avenge him. Where does it end? Hassan, when does the blood debt get paid? How many more people have to die? My brother's sons will grow up knowing their uncle tried to avenge their father and was shown mercy instead of death. That's the story you'll tell them. That's the legacy you'll leave. Not more violence, not more orphans, not more widows. The cycle ends here tonight with your life spared instead of taken. Hassan closed his eyes and Catherine saw something break in him. The decade of rage, of planning, of hate, all of it cracking under the weight of unexpected mercy. The Americans will prosecute me. I'll go to prison. Yes, but you'll be alive. Your nephews will have family. They'll have a chance to grow up without carrying your rage forward. That's worth something. He nodded slightly, barely perceptible, then let the medics take him away to treatment and eventually federal custody. David wrapped his arms around Catherine from behind, pulling her close. She leaned into him, feeling the trembling start now that the adrenaline was fading. You okay? No, but I will be. She looked at the double being led away, blood still dripping from the destroyed hand. She was right about one thing. Rebecca Hartley is still in me, still part of who I am. The warrior doesn't just disappear because I want her to. Part, not all, that's what matters. Not all, Catherine agreed, watching as the shipyard filled with emergency vehicles and federal agents in the apparatus of law and justice grinding into motion. Frank approached the old soldier, looking every one of his 68 years, but still standing tall, still present. Hell of a thing, Brennan, hell of a thing. Thanks for the overwatch, Frank. Always. He glanced at where Kodiak and his team were securing the perimeter professional even now. Bull's claiming that shot on the double. Says he owed you from Kandahar. Debt's paid, more than paid. Kodiak joined them, his massive frame somehow looking cheerful despite the night of violence. Ma'am, we swept the perimeter, all tangos accounted for. Hassan's alive and in custody, doubles wounded but stable. Contractors are singing like canaries about who hired them and why. It's a clean op, all things considered. Not clean, Catherine corrected, looking at the blood on the concrete, the wounded being treated, the chaos that came from necessary violence. Messy and public and everything I tried to avoid, but necessary. The necessary ones usually are messy, Padre observed, kissing his rosary beads. But sometimes God puts us where we need to be when we need to be there. Sometimes the plan is bigger than we understand. Harris approached, phone to his ear, looking pleased and exhausted in equal measure. Catherine, I've got Director Morrison on the line. FBI Director. He wants to thank you personally for breaking this case wide open. Also, maybe discuss bringing you back to active duty consulting work with the Bureau, that kind of thing. No. Catherine cut him off immediately, no hesitation. Thank the director for me, but no. I'm done being a ghost, a weapon, a tool. I'm a welder, a mother, a woman who exists in daylight, not shadows. Harris relayed the message, listened, then smiled. He says he understands completely. Also says if you ever change your mind, there's a standing offer. But he respects your choice. Dawn was breaking over Baltimore Harbor as they stood among the industrial carnage, painting everything in shades of gold and hope. The shipyard would need explaining insurance claims, probably a congressional hearing or three. But for now, in this moment, Katherine Brennan stood surrounded by the family she'd chosen, David Frank, the operators who'd answered the call, Harris, who'd risked everything for justice. Her phone buzzed. A text from the safe house where Sophie waited with one of Harris's most trusted agents. Mom, is it breakfast time yet? I'm hungry. Catherine typed back, her fingers shaking slightly. On my way, sweetheart. Pancakes or waffles? Both in bacon. And can we talk about getting a dog? Demanding child, David teased, reading over her shoulder. Wonder where she gets it, Catherine deadpanned. Her mother, obviously, definitely her mother. They left the shipyard as police tape went up and investigators swarmed the scene like ants on a drop popsicle. Katherine Brennan Welder would have to answer questions about why terrorists and mercenaries had chosen her workplace for their showdown. She had a story, ready, mistaken identity, wrong place, wrong time, Thank God for the FBI response. Some of them might even believe it. 6 months later, Katherine stood in the same shipyard teaching a class of apprentices, veterans transitioning to civilian life referred through Frank's ever-expanding network of people who'd served and now needed purpose. Remember, she told them, running a perfect bead for demonstration, welding is about joining things that were separate, making something broken whole again. Every ship we build carries sailors home. Every beam we join keeps families safe. It's not just metalwork, it's purpose made manifest. One of the apprentices, a young woman with a 1,000-yard stare of recent combat, raised her hand tentatively. Ma'am, is it true what they say about you being a SEAL about the trafficking ring? Katherine considered her answer, aware that every person in the room was watching, waiting. The official story was public now, decorated veteran, helped stop human trafficking operation. The truth was more complex, messier, but then truth always was. I served, she said, simply choosing her words with care. Did things I'm proud of and things that haunt me. Now I build instead of destroy. Both matter. Both have purpose. The question isn't whether you were a warrior, it's what you choose to do with that experience now that the shooting stopped. After class, she found David waiting by her truck laptop bag slung over his shoulder. His story about the trafficking ring had won a Pulitzer nomination and triggered a Senate investigation that was still unraveling threads of corruption. More importantly, it had led to 15 additional arrests and 43 reunited families. Sophie's at soccer practice, he said, holding up her water bottle that she'd forgotten that morning. Thought we could grab dinner someplace that doesn't require you to shower first. Would you do that to me? Yes. Honest, man, I like that about you. Among my many charms. So about dinner, Frank's already at the bar. Harris is bringing his family, even Kodiak's in town. A reunion. An announcement. David pulled out the small velvet box she recognized, opened it to show the silver ring with Sophie's sapphire. Katherine Brennan, I've been patient. I've waited while you dealt with federal investigations and Senate hearings and therapy sessions and all the aftermath. But 6 months is long enough. Will you marry me so I can officially be Sophie's stepdad and we can argue about who does dishes? Katherine looked at the ring, at this man who'd seen her kill and create, destroy, and build, fall apart, and put herself back together. That's still a terrible proposal. It's the same proposal from 6 months ago. You said yes then. I'm saying yes now, but you need to work on your romantic speeches. I'll get right on that after we tell Sophie. She's already planning the wedding, by the way. Wants it at the shipyard with the cranes decorated in lights. Your daughter has opinions. Our daughter, Katherine corrected, and saw David's eyes light up with joy. That night, surrounded by the family they'd chosen and forged in fire, Katherine watched Sophie demonstrate her soccer moves for Harris's kids, listened to Frank and Kodiak argue about rifle specifications that most people would never understand, felt David's hand warm in hers with the ring catching light. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. For a heartbeat, old instincts flared another threat, another enemy from the past come calling. But it was just a text from an international number. Thank you for my uncle's life, Hamza al-Masri. The Viper's eldest son. Katherine stared at the message, then typed back carefully. Live well. Honor your father's memory with peace, not war. The response came quickly. My uncle told us what you did, what you didn't do. We understand now that not all Americans are enemies. That mercy is stronger than vengeance. The debt is settled. Go in peace. Katherine deleted the thread but kept the lesson. The knowledge that every choice created ripples spreading farther than she could see. Rebecca Hartley had killed 44 people. Katherine Brennan had saved 23 from trafficking, plus however many more Vance would have sold, plus 3 boys in Saudi Arabia who would grow up learning that mercy could end cycles of violence. The math would never balance. The books would never close. But heroes weren't about perfect scores or clean consciences. Heroes were just people who kept trying anyway, who chose each day to be better than their worst moments. Everything okay? David asked, noticing her expression. Yeah, just ghost making peace. Good. We've had enough war for one lifetime. Katherine looked around the bar at her tribe of warriors pretending to be civilians. Her daughter laughing without shadows, her city's lights twinkling through windows that had witnessed so much history. Tomorrow she'd teach more veterans to weld building futures from steel and purpose. Sophie would go to school where everyone knew her mom was a hero, even if they didn't know the classified details. David would write stories that mattered. Frank would keep watching over them all, like the guardian he'd always been. Life would be beautifully, preciously normal. But tonight, Katherine Brennan existed completely. No shadows she couldn't face, no secrets that could destroy her, no identity that could be erased. She was proof that people could change, that warriors could choose peace, that ghosts could become real. Rebecca Hartley was dead, 44 kills buried with her. Katherine Brennan was fully and possibly defiantly alive. And that was enough. Actually, it was everything. Thank you for watching this incredible journey of Katherine Brennan, the Navy SEAL sniper who chose family over glory, mercy over vengeance, and peace over war. Katherine's story reminds us that true strength isn't about how many battles you win, but about which battles you choose to fight. It's about the courage to change, the wisdom to forgive, and the love that makes us fully human, even when the world tries to erase us. If this story moved you, please hit that like button right now. It helps us bring more powerful stories like this to viewers who need them. Subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell so you never miss another tale of courage and sacrifice. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that no matter how dark things get, no matter how impossible the odds seem, a parent's love can overcome any obstacle. A warrior's heart can choose peace. And even when the system tries to erase you, your choices define who you truly are. Leave a comment below. What would you have done in Katherine's position? Would you have taken the shot that changed everything? Would you have shown mercy to your enemy? Would you have shielded the man who came to destroy your family? Until next time, stay strong, stay vigilant, stay true to who you are. Remember, some of the greatest heroes are the ones whose names never make the headlines. The ones who choose not to fight. The ones who exist not in databases, but in the hearts of those they protect. This has been the story of Katherine Brennan, the ghost who became real, the erased woman who proved you can't delete what matters most: love, honor, and the courage to be more than your past.